1,900 feet or 580 meters, the detonation mechanism triggers. A nuclear chain reaction is initiated. There's a bright flash of light above the Shima Hospital in Hiroshima, Japan. The temperature instantly increases to over 12,600 degrees Fahrenheit or 7,000 degrees Celsius. A fireball envelops the middle of the city. Its blast wave destroys everything within a quarter of a mile radius. 70,000 people are killed instantly. Anyone who survives the initial blast is not safe either, as they're plagued with burns, radiation poisoning, and eventually an agonizing death. The city of Hiroshima is on fire. What happens next is a story of tragedy and a warning for the future. The morning of August 6, 1945, hours before the bomb drops over Hiroshima. At approximately 2:45 a.m., the Enola Gay takes off from an airfield on Tinian Island, approximately 1,568 miles or 2,524 kilometers from Hiroshima, Japan. Aboard the modified B-29 is the atomic bomb named Little Boy. It has a yield of 15 kilotons of TNT. It takes 5.5 hours to reach its target. When the aircraft is over the city of Hiroshima, Colonel Paul Tibbets Jr. relinquishes the controls of the Enola Gay to bombardier Tom Farabee, who looks through the sighting lens at the city below. Farabee spots the Aoi Bridge crossing the Ota River. Before the war, Hiroshima was the 7th largest city in Japan, with a population of just over 340,000. It governed and served as an economic...
So basically, this is what happens if Joe Biden gives Ukraine a nuke and we get a nuke shot towards us.
The southwestern region of the country. Once the conflict began, Hiroshima became important command centers on the island. A major part of the Chugoku region army was stationed there, along with military supply depots and factories. The city also served as an important shipping point for Japanese soldiers and supplies. The United States has heavily bombed the surrounding area, but the factories are still churning out weapons and vehicles. Colonel Tibbets gives the order for his crew to put on their protective goggles. Farabee wipes his brow and pushes his face.
Ordinary life got you down.
Don't you ever want to do anything exciting? Like what?
What if adventure was...
Play with your butthole?
Stressed out? Time to refresh your rhythm with
I
Trident.
don't think Trident's gonna help my
Against the
stress.
sighting apparatus one last time. He spots his target and drops the bomb at 8:15 a.m. on the morning of August 6, 1945. The moment the bomb Tibbets banks the B-29 hard in hopes of reaching safety before the atomic bomb detonates. At that same moment, industrial workers across the city are already hard at work. Many others are on their way to their respective assignments. Almost every school-age child, along with soldiers and civilians, are hard at work dismantling buildings around the city to provide fire breaks if Allied forces carry out another firebombing run, as they did in Tokyo. It didn't take long for news of the Tokyo bombing on the night of March 9th to spread across the Japanese Empire. 100,000 civilians had been burned alive, and over 1 million people were now homeless. To prevent a repeat of this type of firebombing, cities across Japan, including Hiroshima, are desperately trying to create fire breaks to slow any inferno caused by an Allied attack. The children and workers around the city start each day by dismantling more buildings and clearing debris. The morning of August 6th is no different. Early that morning, a bombing raid siren blared across the city. However, the bombs never fell. So approximately 45 minutes earlier, the all clear had been
So I was
given,
just
and
beating
everyone
that
went to
up
work.
because we
This is
already
why
did
most
all
of the
this
cities
in
out of their
part
shelters and
1.
falling into their normal routines. Some people hear the low buzz of plane engines, but it's not the roar associated with a large bombing squadron. And since the sirens aren't sounding, everyone carries on doing business as usual as the atomic bomb from Enola Gay descends through the sky above Hiroshima. Fujio Torikoshi is about to leave his house and head to the hospital.
Like,
with his mother,
subscribe,
who's been
share, by
diagnosed
the way,
with a
hit
vitamin
thumbs up.
deficiency and needs another medical exam. The rumbling of the B-29 engine buzzes through the house. Fujio steps outside to look up at the sky. He doesn't see anything. He calls back to his mother to let her know that the planes just seem to be passing by when he notices a black dot falling toward the city in the valley below. He opens his mouth to ask his mother what it is when that black dot erupts into a blindingly intense flash of light. Moments later, a burst of hot wind hits Fujio's face. He falls to the ground. Fujio scrambles to get up and seek shelter, but a second blast wave lifts him off the ground and throws him against the side of the house. He blacks out. It took 45 seconds for Little Boy to descend to its detonation altitude of 0.36 miles or 0.58 kilometers above. The bomb exploded and everything directly below was instantly incinerated. The blast wave is what knocked Fujio off his feet, and it extended. Fujio finally comes to and rubs the back of his head. His body is covered in radiation burns. It feels like his skin is on fire. Fujio jumps into a nearby water tank to try to alleviate the burning sensation, but nothing works. He screams in agony. Fujio hears his mother calling for him. He yells for help. She pulls him out of the water, and all he can do is tell her how much his body burns. Fujio's mother holds him in her arms and rocks him back and forth. Tears stream down her face as she looks at the destruction of Hiroshima below and the mushroom cloud from the atomic explosion rising 60,000 feet into the air. Days later, Fujio returns home after receiving medical attention at an air raid shelter and a makeshift hospital nearby. His entire body is completely wrapped in bandages to protect the burn wounds from getting debris into them and causing an infection. Fujio's face swells to the point that he can no longer open his eyes, and his fever refuses to break. His mother sits next to him playing lullabies on her harmonica. Moments after the detonation, 70,000 civilians, children, and soldiers are dead. Entire family bloodlines have been erased from existence. The destruction extends to all parts of Hiroshima. The waters of the Ota River instantly evaporated. The river and its tributaries divide the city into 6 islands, which jut out into Hiroshima Bay. Water continues to flow downstream, replacing all the water that was lost. The result is a series of natural fire breaks. However, the fires will quickly spread regardless, as pressure changes result in strong winds. There were 81 bridges connecting the islands of Hiroshima. Many have collapsed or are damaged beyond repair. The immediate aftermath. Milliseconds after detonation, the fireball created by the atomic bomb expanded to 900 feet or 275 meters from ground zero.
Here's where we
The
left
blast wave
off
itself
at in the
decimated the
last
city,
video,
shattered windows
actually.
for dozens of miles.
Okay,
and
what's up,
37 miles or 60 kilometers
77363
away.
crew?
Over 2/3
Yeah,
of
that
all
wasn't
buildings in
the
city have been
end of
destroyed.
the
Fires
last
erupted across
live.
Hiroshima
It's
as
right at
anything
the end of the
flammable
last
ignites from the
one.
intense heat. Everything within 4.4 miles or 7 kilometers of the blast's epicenter is incinerated from the raging inferno. This includes schools, churches, destruction occurs. There is no transportation or safe passage out of the city. Anyone who has survived the initial blast must dodge the raging fire encompassing the city, escape crumbling buildings, and survive their irradiated wounds before they can reach safety. The streets of Hiroshima become eerily quiet. The only sounds heard are the crackling of wood burning and the crumbling of structures. Shadows of people who have been vaporized are cast into the stone of buildings. These nuclear shadows appeared when the initial
Goddamn.
blast bleached everything in the area. Human bodies, lamp posts, or anything solid that blocked.
Hang on, give me a second, sorry. Like, subscribe, share, by the way. Make sure you hit that thumbs up.
Burnt away from the intense heat of the blast. At Sumitomo Bank, the shadow of a man holding a walking stick is forever cast on the steps as his body is completely vaporized. In the distance, the Enola Gay proceeds back toward Tinian Island. Less than 2% of the uranium-235 within the bomb achieved fission. And still, almost the entire city of Hiroshima has been destroyed. Sergeant Bob Karen was the only crew member of the Enola Gay who actually saw the blast, as he's the plane's tail gunner. He describes the detonation of Little Boy over Hiroshima as a peep into hell. Co-pilot Captain Robert Lewis looks back at the mushroom cloud rising into the sky. My God, what have we done? He says. The flight back is a somber one. There's never been a flight crew who has been solely responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of people. When the Enola Gay lands back at Tinian Island, Colonel Paul Tibbets is given the Distinguished Service Cross. The firestorm
Like,
phenomenon that
subscribe, share,
develops
by the
seconds
way,
after the
hit
bomb
thumbs up.
detonates is unlike anything anyone has ever seen. Different fires ignite simultaneously in various parts of the city. The
We're
inrush of
almost
air
caught
that
up.
results from the low pressure area created at ground zero, where a huge amount of air molecules has been initially forced outward, fuels the already raging fires. The wind created by this phenomenon picks up small pieces of burning debris and carries it at 35 miles per hour, or 56 kilometers per hour across the city. This fire wind blows continuously for around 2 to 3 hours after the blast. Many people lived in wooden structures in Hiroshima, with around 1.5 of all dwellings being 1 story and the other half 2 stories. The residential areas do not have walls or any type of division between them to keep the fires from jumping from one structure to the next. This, coupled
Like
with
New
the inadequate
York,
firefighting equipment,
Chicago.
much of which had been destroyed in the initial blast, means that anyone who is still alive isn't able to do anything to stop the fire from making its way outward from the epicenter. Around 30 minutes after the atomic bomb goes off over
They're
Hiroshima,
dead
heavy
from the
rains begin to
fucking
fall.
nuclear
The water droplets
bomb.
are full of dust, soot, and radioactive particles. This becomes known as black rain. It seems that the water should be a much welcome relief for Hiroshima, but it does very little to combat the fires. Instead, anyone caught in a rainstorm is covered in more radiation. The clouds continue on, and the radioactive black
Man,
rain
I feel
contaminates
like
the areas
shit.
that were initially spared from the devastation of the blast. Yoshito Matsushige had just finished his breakfast and was about to leave for work at the local newspaper in Hiroshima when the bomb went off. Every wire in the house sparks. There's a bright flash of light. For a moment, everything is silent. Then the blast wave hits. The heat is so intense that Yoshito feels like millions of tiny needles are pricking his skin. He rubs his eyes to clear his vision. The entire room is filled with dirt and smoke. Yoshito scrambles to get out of the house. On his way through the door, he grabs his camera. Whatever has happened needs to be documented for the newspaper. What Yoshito walks into is more reminiscent of hell than the city he lived in his entire life. He heads toward what used to be the newspaper headquarters. He passes Miyuki Bridge, where he sees dozens of
And a
people
little
standing around the
plastic
police box.
stiffener
Many
in
are high
here.
schoolers from the nearby Hiroshima Girls Business School and Hiroshima Junior High School No. 1. These young girls had been outside when the bomb detonated. Yoshito notices blisters cover their arms and faces. Some of the girls' skin has begun to fall off their bodies. Everywhere Yoshito looks, it's like being in a gruesome nightmare. The smell of burning bodies fills the air. Yoshito pulls his camera to his face and peers through the cracked viewfinder. Before he snaps a picture, he lowers the camera and shakes his head. It's all too terrible. He begins helping in any way he can. The rest of August 6th is filled with chaos as people try to escape
Yeah,
the
watch
inferno
this
and survive
ad.
the destruction.
Dirty as
There is
hell.
no organized relief yet, as the infrastructure and people of Hiroshima have been completely devastated. The fires continue to rage, lighting up the city. From miles away, Hiroshima looks like a burning torch that illuminates the cold, still night. 24 hours after the bomb detonated over Hiroshima. Since the atomic blast, survivors have been desperately trying to escape the city. There's mass confusion as the blaze continues to spread with
bet.
seemingly no end in sight. However, help is slowly arriving. By August 7th, people are beginning to head back toward the city by the thousands. Families look for lost loved ones. Parents shout their children's names. Thousands of people are missing. Tragically, literally nothing of them remains to be found. Some people return to their homes to assess the damage to their property. The military has taken control of some entry routes and set up roadblocks to keep anyone who does not have a reason to be there out of the city. There is little left in Hiroshima for residents who initially fled and sought refuge in nearby hills and the countryside to return to. Those who are still in the city are hungry, as food supplies have been utterly destroyed. The commander of the Second Army takes control of the situation and starts organizing any remaining troops to carry out relief efforts. Many of the military buildings that were constructed on the outskirts of the city still stand. These structures are used as triage centers and shelter for the thousands of Hiroshima residents who have nowhere else to go. It's at these facilities that army rations are given to refugees, along with any clothing that has not been destroyed. Only 190 police officers and approximately 2,000 members of the Civilian Defense Corps are available to provide aid, and these numbers are drastically lower than before the bomb dropped. Any facilities within and on the outskirts of the city that have not been destroyed and are in no immediate danger of being consumed by fires are staffed with skeleton crews. There are just not enough support personnel to go around. Medical facilities have been especially hit hard. There were over 200 doctors in Hiroshima the day before. Now only about 10% of them remain. There are 30 doctors in the entire city that are able to perform their duties. It's estimated that out of the 1,780 nurses in Hiroshima, around 1,650 were killed or injured in the blast. Out of the 45 hospitals in the city, only 3 remain. On top of this, the bulk of the medical supplies were lost in the explosion and resulting fires. Hiroshima doesn't have the personnel, supplies, or facilities necessary to treat the thousands of casualties that are flooding into their makeshift wards every hour. Even hospitals that were constructed using reinforced concrete and located further away from ground zero suffered massive interior damage due to the shockwave. Their shells still stand, but the facilities themselves are useless, especially because the structures are now radioactive. Throughout the day of August 7th, fire brigades are dispatched to try to get some of the runaway infernos under control. However, due to the lack of supplies, this seems to be an unattainable goal. Water pressure in the city is non-existent due to a number of breaks in water mains across Hiroshima. This occurred at places where the water system crossed now destroyed bridges. At least 6 water pumping stations were demolished or rendered inoperable in the blast. However, 8 others are only slightly damaged, but without anyone to repair them, they remain offline. The firefighters have to make do with what they have. Engineers try rerouting water to pipes that have not been compromised, but this is a slow and arduous task. As emergency personnel struggle to get the fires under control and rescue anyone they find in the rubble of Hiroshima, the military tries to jumpstart production again. The war is not over, and although morale in this part of the country is low, many still believe they have a duty to aid the empire in its fight against the Allied forces. Only one day after the atomic bomb is dropped on the city, the governor issues a proclamation stating the people of Hiroshima need to aid in a rehabilitation of the stricken city and an aroused fighting spirit to exterminate the devilish Americans. In order to raise morale in the wake of the immense loss and destruction, 210,000 newspapers from nearby cities are brought into Hiroshima daily since liquor facilities are all destroyed. The result is most able-bodied people resume contributing to wartime production instead of aiding in efforts to save what remains of the city or beginning the rebuilding process. This mentality will continue until Emperor Hirohito announces the surrender of Japan in the coming days. 48 hours after the bomb detonated over Hiroshima, train services into the city are restored and allow for supplies to be sent to and from Hiroshima. However, rescue efforts will be hindered for a while longer while repairs are made to the infrastructure in the city. Fire trucks still need to pump water from tanks to put out the flames, as water pressure in many parts of the city still hasn't been fixed. Surprisingly, however, electric power to many of the industrial structures still standing around the city is brought back online. All but one major factory that was not destroyed in the blast, and 30% of homes now have power. Emiko Okada searches the ruins of the city with her parents to try to find her sister, who had been working on the fire breaks when the bomb detonated. Emiko is very sick from the large dose of radiation she received from the atomic bomb. She's been vomiting non-stop for the past 2 days.
Oh, here we go. This is what we wanted to find out about.
Runs her hand through her hair. Clumps of it fall out. In the days to come, she will lose all of her hair due to radiation poisoning. Her mouth constantly tasted like iron from her bleeding gums. Sister. Her parents refused to write an obituary for her in hopes that she is still alive somewhere. 76 hours after the bomb detonated, Soviet forces captured Manchuria. There's been no talk of surrender by the Japanese emperor or his military advisors. The factories in Hiroshima continue to operate with reduced staff as fires continue around the city. At 3:47 a.m., a B-29 with the designation Boxcar takes off from Tinian Island. At 11 a.m., Boxcar flies over Nagasaki. The clouds are thick. The visibility of the ground is near zero. The plane is low on fuel and about to turn back without dropping its payload when an opening in the clouds appears. Major Charles W. Sweeney orders the bomb to be dropped, even without the target being properly sighted. The atomic bomb, known as Fat Man, descends to an altitude of 1,650 feet or 500 meters and detonates at 11:02 a.m. with a force of 21,000 tons of TNT. 40,000 people are instantly killed in the city of Nagasaki in the same way that Hiroshima had been devastated 3 days before. News reaches Hiroshima that another city has been hit by an atomic bomb. Ryoga Suwa is 12 years old. His parents are missing, his sister is dead. He's known as an atomic bomb orphan, and he is by no means the only one. Tens of thousands of children will grow up without their parents who were killed in the blasts of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A few days after the atomic bomb fell on Hiroshima, Ryoga is loaded into a train and brought 50 kilometers away with other children and refugees. He will return to Hiroshima 1 month later and be taken back to where he used to live to collect his personal belongings. He passes the temple that he used to go to with his family. The tombstones in the cemetery are overturned from the blast. The Setonai Islands sit in the distance. Ryoga used to be able to see buildings on the islands. Now the landscape is flat, as if no one has ever lived there. 4 days after the bomb detonated over Hiroshima, the day after the second atomic bomb was dropped on Japan and destroyed Nagasaki, the Japanese government issues a statement of surrender. Their terms declare that the emperor will maintain his position and continue to be the sovereign ruler of Japan. The Allies reject the offer. U.S. Secretary of State James F. Burns makes a statement saying, "From the moment of surrender, the authority of the emperor and the Japanese government to rule the state shall be subject to the supreme commander of the Allied powers, who will take such steps as he deems proper to effectuate the surrender terms." President Harry Truman is notified that another atomic bomb is ready for shipment and can be dropped on another Japanese target in a matter of days. The factories at Hiroshima continue to churn out any military equipment they can. The fires are slowly beginning to be put out. People continue to die in overcrowded makeshift hospitals from burns, radiation poisoning, and wounds sustained from the blast. 8 days after the bomb detonated over Hiroshima, Japanese military leaders carry out a coup to overthrow the emperor and his advisors, who have decided to surrender. The revolt fails, and on August 14th, 1945, the Japanese government accepts the Allied terms of unconditional surrender. A recording of Emperor Hirohito's voice is broadcast across the nation. The recording informs the Japanese people that they will be surrendering to the Allied forces. The moment that the broadcast is heard by the citizens of Hiroshima, the mentality of the city shifts. Many can't believe they've lost the war, but without every ounce of energy and resources being poured into the war machine, they can begin rebuilding their city. Factories that the government took control of are returned to private owners. Local authorities of Hiroshima start creating a plan of recovery. The smoldering city will never be the same, but the population can now begin to rebuild and slowly heal from the devastation of the atomic bomb. 1 month after the bomb detonated over Hiroshima. World War II officially comes to an end on September 2nd, 1945, when Japanese Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu and General Yoshihiro Umezu signed the formal surrender documents aboard the deck of the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. A turning point in history has been reached. Japan will suffer under Allied occupation. However, Hiroshima and Nagasaki will
Like,
eventually
subscribe,
receive
share,
additional
hit
aid
thumbs
from
up,
Brazil.
yo. Thanks for
Unfortunately
watching.
Hiroshima, things are about to get a lot worse, but getting better. On September 17th, Typhoon